Hey everyone, get ready for a new episode of Inspired, the refreshing podcast made to have conversations centered around being designed by God to discover and dwell. Whether you're a mom, young professional, a caretaker, or whatever season in life you're in, you're sure to pick up helpful insights, thoughts to think about throughout the week, and leave this episode feeling inspired to know God in deeper ways. I'm Jessica, and I'm on the Inspired team here at X Church. And today, we have Rebecca Brown on the podcast to share how discovering God has helped her discover who she is. She's a pastor's wife, servant leader, a teacher, and a mom to 3 girls. But she says it's not about what she does, but who she is becoming. So listen in.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us for the Inspired podcast. And we have a really, really great time ahead for us.
Yes.
I've got Jess here.
Hey.
And we have a special guest.
Hello.
Yay, it's Rebecca Brown. And she is just absolutely amazing. You're going to love all the things she's going to share today. Rebecca is the wife of Pastor Zach, who's on staff here.
Yeah.
And she's also part of our Inspired team. Just an amazing lady. She's a servant leader. She is a teacher. And she's a mother of 3, including a newborn. How old is Oakley?
About a month old.
Oh, my goodness. And she's
July
here with
15th.
us. I mean, that is amazing. And she looks incredible. So
you.
all of
Yeah.
you who've had little ones, you know how hard that is
I don't
sometimes.
even think that I had put makeup on or did my hair before, like, no, yeah.
Yeah, I
You're a
like to
rock
feel
star.
like a human being, so that's why I'm here.
Probably gave some like normalcy to your life to
Yeah,
actually like
absolutely.
put some makeup on and
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about this later, but I'm a people person, so I need to be around my people.
So this is good for your soul.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So, Rebecca, tell us a little bit about yourself. Just, what's a really interesting fact about you?
An interesting fact. Gosh, that took me off guard. I feel like most people don't know this, but my dad was a pastor. And both of my grandparents were pastors. Both of my grandfathers were.
It's in your blood.
Wow.
Let's hear
Yes,
something.
and of course
Let's hear
I
some preaching here.
married a pastor. No, I'm not the pastor. But yeah, so I have been in the church, capital C church, for a really long time.
Yeah.
It's just been a part of my upbringing and growing up, and yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, last week we had Morgan here. Morgan is just totally amazing. And she gave us kind of an outline of how God helped her discover her design, how he created her. And it was a really great story to see just the threads through her life over and over again between people who talked with her, encouraged her, and brought it all together to the place where she is right now. And this week, though, we're going to be taking a look at what it looks like to discover who God is and discover who we are and what our purpose is. And so, I was thinking, you just mentioned that your dad was a pastor and also that you have obviously, I guess, a pedigree of pastoring. I mean, it's like, wow. So, I would assume that you've been around church a lot, probably from the very beginning,
Yep.
Christian lifestyle, all that. So, and it's easy when you're raised in that just to kind of like, it's like osmosis. But there has to come a point where you make it real, your relationship with God real for you, rather than just like I've inherited this because this is the way I've grown up. So tell us a little bit, how did that happen for you?
yeah, so like I said, I've been in and around church my entire life since the moment I was born, really. We moved around a lot, but like we were always in church. That was the one thing that my parents, we were there whenever the doors opened. And I'm so thankful for that foundation because obviously I wouldn't be here without that. So I'm so thankful for that. But when it really became my own, I accepted Jesus when I was a child, when I was like 5 or 6. And then I was baptized as a teenager, and I knew what it meant at the time. But, in those moments, you don't know what it means to really like take responsibility for your faith and like what that looks like. So that became real for me when I went to college. And I went to a Christian university. Shout out to MVNU. So I went to school there, and because it was a community of faith, it was that's what I was surrounded by, was the constant discussion about like faith and your journey and like what God is doing in your life. I mean, from professors to pastors to mentors to, you know, all the adults
Probably
on the campus.
a lot of your classes too.
Oh yeah, classes. I mean, we prayed before and after. Like there was just such an emphasis on that, constantly. Like it was just, you know, like I said, it was just like the way of life there. And also being surrounded by all of my friends, who were in the same phase of life, were in the same, you know, who were all Christians. So that's when it really became mine in terms of like, oh, it's my responsibility to wake up on Sunday morning and get to church. Like
well, a lot
it's
of that
not,
happens just naturally as like you are away from your parents, and your responsibility changes from them like making you do things, and then it becomes like your own personal choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I lived off, you know, I lived not at home on campus. So because of that, you know, we made the decision not every Sunday. I'm not going to lie.
No.
We didn't go to church every Sunday. But, you know, that was something that we really had to be intentional about. And not only that, but just, it's, you know, I need to make time to not only study, but I need to make time to read the Bible, and I need to make time to discover who God is and what his purpose is for me. And obviously that's looked differently since then, but that's, I would say, college really like shaped and formed that.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think that, like what you're saying about it just sounds like and really speaks to the principle that discovering who God is a process. I mean, like it might have started in college and started there, learning. I mean, and it probably built upon the foundation that you had in church. I mean, like you grew up knowing stories like Bible stories, and you probably knew all of the token ones like Noah and the ark and Moses and all that. And probably when you started becoming like, you started taking ownership of actually like the foundation that was built for you, started taking ownership of that. And then probably now where you are even looks different from what it did in college. And it's just like such a process of discovering who God is. And then like what comes out of that is discovering who you are, right?
Yep,
so what
absolutely.
if, I mean, like from college, like, so you brought us up to speed to college, but like, what about from college to where you are now? What is it? I mean, like, what does it look like to discover who God is in your life? And then like a lot of, I mean, like we've been talking a lot about this in our culture is like self-discovery, and like we are deconstructing some things from past, you know, mental arenas. And so like, what has that looked like for you more recently?
So I feel like one of the biggest things that I've done to really like discover who God is throughout the years, and like I said, this has changed and maybe been a little different, but putting myself in situations where I can be like stretched and challenged. So whether that's stepping out and like being a part of a Bible study with other women, like putting myself in those communities where we can learn from each other and also like learn about God's word. Even more recently, like doing a study on how to actually study the Bible, and figuring out like the purpose of the Bible, so that way we can determine, you know, who God's character is. So that way we can discover like our purpose and who God has created us to be. Also, I just think over the years, like I just have learned to live an intentional life. So really just thinking about like right now as a mom, and this is, you know, I have an almost 5-year-old, so it's been, you know, almost 5 years now, but living an intentional life where I have recognized and identified that God has called me to be a mom in this season. I work from home. It's messy. It's exhausting. But
What do you do?
What
do you do? What
work
do
from
you,
home?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a
In
teacher.
your job. What kind of teacher?
So I teach 6th grade intervention specialist, which is like special ed. And I teach for Ohio Virtual Academy. So I teach online permanently, not just because of COVID. I always tell people that because it's like confusing. So I work full time at home, but also I'm a mom, and they're not home all the time during the school year, but they're home a lot of the time while I'm working. So like I said, it's messy, it's exhausting, but I know that like that is the purpose God has for me right now, and I have the opportunity every day to speak words of life over them and to be Jesus to my kids. And I think that that's what I've learned over the course of the past several years is that, that's my ministry, is being at home, taking care of my kids, every diaper change right now with a newborn, every load of laundry. Like, it's not always fun, but I know that's how I'm being Jesus to them, is doing all of those selfless
taking care
things.
of their physical needs. I mean, like that's Jesus did that constantly. I mean, like we talk about the character of Jesus, and like, we want the love and peace and patience and kindness and goodness, faithfulness and all that. But a lot of times, like when you go back to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you read what Jesus did for people, he not only like gave them, forgiveness and gave them God himself and salvation, but he also met their physical needs. And oftentimes he did that first. He met their physical needs first before he met them with faith. And like, that's just like, you're totally right. It's an example, especially in like, Morgan talked about this last week about the ministry of motherhood. And she said that's her first ministry. And so you're completely right about when we're serving our kids and when we're putting their needs first and we're meeting their physical needs, and that is a tangible way to model Christ to them. So, but
and I just think like the power of words, if you were at Freedom Conference, like this was discussed.
It was so good.
But the power of words over them, I think that it's easier, what I've learned, it's easier to speak words of life and talk to others about Jesus. Like, it's easier to talk about, to your friends, people you're mentoring, but to your kids, it's one of the most challenging things to do. So that is what you're
talking about. It's super easy for me. I mean, like, to speak words of life over my kids. What?
To just be so nice all the time. So loving and kind. Yeah.
Patient.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, right. Don't do that. What?
So, so I'm learning every day, and I wake up in prayer every day that I will just be more like him and how I specifically speak to them and spend time with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you were talking about college and all that being really sounding like a very, very significant time in your life, and discovering your faith and really discovering who God is. Were there any people, or even now, that have been significant in helping you discovering yourself as far as your purpose or discovering who God is?
Yeah. So, not so much a specific person in college necessarily, but since we came to X Church, there has definitely been a number of women who have affected me and and inspired me, really. And I feel like the past couple years specifically, me and 2 other women, Jess being one of them, where we just started getting breakfast once a week.
We talked about this running or breakfast.
We started with breakfast.
What were we thinking?
And then we started running and then getting breakfast, and now we're just back to getting breakfast.
Nobody needs running in their life.
Yeah, I know. We'll get back to that eventually. But
there's been some pregnancies since then, so
which don't run while you're pregnant. But yeah, we have been getting breakfast. I mean, not every week. Sometimes it's every other week. But we have conversations about parenting. We have conversations about God. We have conversations about, oh my gosh, everything. I mean, decorating our house, silly things, but also the important things. And so that, just having that small circle and community has been life-giving and life-changing. They're also not scared to challenge me and to say, have you thought about it this way? or, have you tried doing this, or have you read this book? And so because of that, I 100%, I've discovered more who God is because of their friendships and because of the conversations we've had. So
Yeah.
I'm so appreciative of that. And like I've kept my circle, small because like I said, I can be my true authentic self with them, with you guys. So yeah.
I think that's so important for women to have that circle, to have a couple. I have 5 women, I think I've shared this before, that I've known for over 30 years. And
You call them friends of your heart.
yeah, they really are. I introduce them to anybody as my sister. I don't have a biological sister, but they really are sisters. And that's the same thing, that we call each other out on things, but we're there in the really hard places when you feel like you want to give up, and you're going to say, no, you can do this, and point me to God and point me to the truth and things like that. It's really, really important. That's, and that's one of the things that, as Inspired, that we are, that's one of the things that we've shared, is it's really important to have that, to look for those people that can be your people, your circle, that you can be that open with and vulnerable. Because I think in that interplay between us, we do learn about who God is. None of us can have all the pieces.
Yep.
And so when we have that, we learn something, about something else, about an attribute of Him that maybe we hadn't really seen before.
Yeah, and I think also not only having conversations, but also just like watching them do life and seeing their example that they provide, like, you being a mom of older kids, like that has always been, like I could see how you talk to them and just all of that. And just seeing the example that you provide, like has always been life-giving.
I say that it's not my nature to be like super nurturing, but like that's wrong because that's not true. But I think that I have 3 boys, and so I feel like I'm a little bit rougher, when it comes to like, not speaking very sweetly to my kid. I don't mean like I'm just always mean to them, but just like the nurturing aspect of like taking them in close and like just providing that safe space for them. But I remember I had a woman that was a few years older than me when I had Jude. And she had a few kids. They were like toddlers and babies, and she just like struck me. Just one characteristic about her, she just struck me, was that she was so gentle, and like that she would just like hold her kids and sing to them. And I'm like, I don't want to sing to my kids. They don't want to hear my voice. And so, but like just to even, like you said, like the physical example that people can set in front of you. And she probably never knows that her just doing what she does, being a mom, was actually something that really impacted me, because I was like, I just learned a lot about gentleness and how like she would scoop her kids up and sing to them and like rub their knee or whatever. And that just wasn't my natural bent. Like, cause I think my natural bent is like, you'll be okay. You're fine. Like, I'm gonna give you a hug. Like, and then just like go. But even just like the physical example of like people before me, they probably don't even know that.
Like, you remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah. Recently you've stepped into some roles here that you're pouring into others.
Yes.
Which is really, I think is really, really exciting. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and, and how they've played a role in discovering your purpose for right now.
Yeah. So one trait about myself that a lot of people, well, probably actually a lot of people do know, is that I am a people person. I talked about this a minute ago. I love talking to people. I love being around people. And I love being around, obviously, God's people. So in doing that and thinking about that strength that I have, that God has given me, I really felt like the past year, God has been calling me to a higher level of like leading. I really didn't know what that looked like or what that meant, but I definitely felt like I was called for something like higher and bigger. And then one day, as Zach and I were talking, my husband, he was like, I really think we need to start a college group, and we need to do this, and it needs to be once a week, and we need to have like a meal every week. And he was like going on and on and on, and I just was like, no.
Here at my
I was
house?
like, I don't know about that. I definitely kind of put up a wall at first, because I'm like, college age, like, no. Like, they just remind me of teenagers.
Like, no.
I was like, absolutely not. So we continued talking about it. And part of the reason why he wanted to start this, because we were in the process of building a home. And our heart and prayer was that this home would be it would be a tool, and not just a place we live. Like, it would be
I love that.
a tool.
That's
and
such a mindset shift.
Yeah.
And like we pray. I mean, we prayed over this house like so
You're
much.
leveraging what God has given you for Him.
That's awesome.
Because it is such a blessing that we were able to build and buy a home. So we just we took full advantage of that. So over the course of our conversations, I would be like, okay, well, like, what if we do this? And God he really just softened my heart and was like, this is it. Like, this is what you need to do. So I think we launched and started that in, I think, March, and we moved in our house in February. But we
It's a great way to break it in.
started, we just have a party every
Hit
week.
the ground running.
So in March we started our group. We have a group text that's constantly going. I'm pretty sure there's like 20 plus kids in there. Young adults. Sorry, they're not kids.
Kids. Those kids.
Sorry, not kids. Adults in the group text, and we I don't even know. We have a big group every Sunday. After church, we do share a meal together every week. And so since all of this happened, like, God has just every week has just solidified and just has made, my heart has just been so full every single week. Like, I haven't regretted it for a second.
Well,
the
isn't it
conversations
ironic?
we have, and
Well, isn't it ironic that when we gear up to, like, say, okay, God, like, what do you want me to do? And then He puts people in your life to pour into, and you think this is just going to suck me dry. Like, I'm just going to be empty.
Yeah.
How much it actually fills you. Like, because that's obedience. And God honors obedience by filling our cups. I mean,
Yep.
and it's funny because we think it's reversed. We think that, like, like, when God calls you to do something, He equips you to do it.
Yeah.
And then He'll also bless. And
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, no, it truly is. Like, I was so hesitant about doing it because I knew that it was going to be exhausting. I mean, I was pregnant,
I don't know
2
how you
young
did that.
kids, and I was like, this is going to drain me. But
all those kids, sorry, I said kids. We're all old sitting at this table,
Yes.
so we're just going to put that out there.
sorry, college crew.
But they've just become an extension to your family. And Charlie and Lily, like your little girls, like, they latch onto them. And
Yeah, and that's one of the things
I
Zach
mean, it's
and I
not
talked
like you
about.
get a babysitter
No.
every week.
No.
I mean, like, you just integrate them.
No,
And
and-
what a beautiful picture that is for
Yes.
Charlie and Lily to
Yep.
see you opening your home and to being hospitable and saying, like, you're welcome here, and this is what Mommy and Daddy are going to do, and this is how we want to live our life. So I was just
Yeah.
And that's one of the things Zach and I talked about ahead of time, and really, like, was, like, purposeful about and intentional about, was that we want these young adults to have just a front row seat to our lives and see our marriage in action and see us parenting in action. That's really one thing I feel like Zach and I did not have when we were in that time. So that's one thing we even told them, like, hey, our kids are going to be here. It's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. They
might sit in timeout.
Yeah, they might scream, or Lily might change her clothes 5
Yeah.
times. But, that was something we were intentional about, and we were very open, and honest with them about, and we just wanted them to see how we lived our life with Christ in the center of everything.
Well, I love that you didn't have the example. So you, in the work that God has done in your life, chose to be an example for someone else. Because I think sometimes, I mean, like, you talk about intentionality. I think sometimes it's easy to kind of go through life and, like, let life happen to you and kind of feel like, out of control, or like, well, that's just what happens, or whatever.
Yeah.
And when we finally decide to kind of get down to the bottom of it and say, okay, like, I'm going to set some patterns in my life, and I'm going to set some boundaries up, and I want to go this way. And like, you put your things in order to go that way, and like, you make it happen is so important, because we can just be caught off guard so many times. But for you guys to not have that example when you had, like, you know, before you had kids, or like when you had really, really little kids, just to be that for someone else speaks a lot to just your heart and what, like, how you want to live your life. And
I love it that it's also too that it's college age, and you shared your story, which was that time period in your life was so significant
you're right.
in finding, you know, discovering and God and making your relationship yours.
Yeah.
And that you're now doing the same thing for, you know, a really incredibly large group of college age students that are in that same place, who are, you know, just trying to figure out life and figure out, you know, what do I think about God, and all the things that they're bombarded with in our culture and all of those things. And you guys are, you know, doing that for them. And I just, you know, that's inspired. You know, that really is. And it's so good to see that, you know. You know, I was thinking, you know, we were talking about the idea about discovering who God is, you know, and I guess this thought came to me. It's like, so often in our culture, people just don't have a really good view of who God is. You know,
right.
And I would be interested in knowing what have you discovered about him, like attributes about who he is.
Yeah, I love that question. Because I am a doer. I'm a busy person. I like to be busy. Not saying that's always healthy or good, but I like to have plans. I like, you know, I'm a goer, doer, goer, whatever. But the past, I don't know, like just recently, I would say maybe the past year or so, like I've just learned that God is not a God of hurry. And that's one thing that I've been really like wrestling with and I struggle with, because he is not a God of hurry. He does not care about our to-do lists and our busyness and how many ministries we're doing and what all the areas we're serving in. He cares more about who we're becoming instead of what we're doing. And I remind myself of that every day, is who are you becoming, and are you becoming more like him? And so I think even now, like having kids, there's not a lot of physical rest, obviously. But he has challenged me and really spoke to me about like finding rest in him, because he's not in a hurry. And so that's one thing that I've learned about him, and also that he's a complex God, but also like he is a God of simplicity.
Simple.
So I would say like a couple of years back, one of my like New Year's resolutions, or whatever you want to call it, I was like really wanting to simplify my life. And what that looked like for me was like, I kind of made a list of like 3 or 4 things. And I shared this with one of my college crew girls a couple weeks ago, because I was like, you need to identify like 3 or 4 areas of your life that you want to focus on, and like you need to say no to everything else. Which is difficult when you come down to it. And, you know, my list looks like, you know, being a wife and mom, like obviously my faith, like Jesus and my church. And then, I think one of the other things I put was like my health, like taking care of my body and taking care of myself. And so all the other stuff that I had like extra going on, I said no to, and I put away and I put down. And it was one of the most freeing things I could ever do. So now my time has been opened up back to, you know, this college group and mentoring some of the girls that are in that group, kind of on an individual basis and things like that. So God just wants us to love him and love people. And sometimes we overcomplicate it way too much, you know? So, yeah.
So you say mentoring. What does that mean? I mean, like, I think that we have, I mean, obviously the word mentor is, you know, talking about someone that is instructing typically someone younger, but not always. But maybe just someone that's gone before. But what is that? I mean, like you said that you find yourself in that position now. So what does that like practically look like?
Yeah. So, what's been nice about this college group is that I've naturally, organically, however you want to say it, have formed relationships on an individual basis with some of the girls in my group. So, I know like one specifically came to me and asked me if like we could get coffee, and then it ended up being like, hey, will you mentor me? I don't think she said those exact words, but now that's the language she uses, because we did a study together, and we were meeting once a week for quite a time, like several months, and so we still talk now, obviously, but it was such a critical time. It was like she had just accepted Jesus into her life, so we met every week, and I just poured into her. Like you know, listened to her. Not only did we did a study about like how to study the Bible, but we also I just helped her navigate through all these different life circumstances that she was going through, a lot of changes. And so I was able to challenge her and help her process those, and through our Christian worldview, or through, through Jesus's eyes. So that's kind of what it looks like for me. And even now, like, I'm not meeting with anyone like on a weekly basis right now, because obviously I just had a baby. But, I've had girls like text me, call me. One came over like 2 Sundays ago just to like talk to me about something that she was struggling with. And one of also, I think the things I've learned, from God in this time is that I'm not everything to everybody.
That's
and
so
I've just taken a step back, and I just have rested in knowing that like, hey, I'm available, and these girls know that. So, each week, like, I get to know them, I talk to them, and it seems like as time has passed, they've been comfortable enough to, come to me, and I've been available. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is just like having open hands, open heart. Like, I'm here for whenever they need it, whether that's one conversation or more of like an intentional, like, mentoring, like we meet every week. And so I've loved it. Like, once again, like it's filled me up more than I ever thought imaginable.
So maybe you can speak into this, because I know that it's very often that we feel unqualified for things.
Yeah.
Especially big, scary things that God puts in front of us that he wants us to take a big leap of faith. But like we talked about last week, like the self-talk, the things that can get us out of doing something big and scary. And so I know that from a stance of feeling like you have something to offer someone else is not really a natural feeling. So can you walk us through what it looked like? I mean, because you obviously had to discover a part of yourself that said, I'm not perfect, I'm still learning, but I can make myself available for someone else. I mean, what kind of steps did you have to go through to just get to that point? Because I think there's so many people that think, oh, I don't have anything to offer.
Yeah.
Or my story, like, I messed up. Like, you don't even know, like, all my history and my baggage and the things that I've gone through. And, like, I haven't handled it right, and I'm still in the wrong or whatever. So maybe speak to the people that have doubts about using their story and their position in life to use that for someone else.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is, like, nobody's perfect. And if you had a perfect life, I feel like you wouldn't be able to speak and have conversations and, like, really be intentional about giving advice. Like, you have to use the experiences and things that you've gone through to really, like, encourage anybody who's younger than you. And that's really how you build, I feel like, equity with them, is saying like, hey, I did this back then, and like it, and this is how I got through it, and talking them through that, so that way, they can make good decisions moving forward. And then obviously, I mean, this is a very churchy answer, but like I pray like daily about the words that I speak to them and speak over them, help them to be your words, but not mine.
Yes, which is so important because we live in a culture where we can be led astray so easily.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
By messages that are coming out. And we can be so quick to form our own opinion about things. And then we put that opinion on other people, or like we thrust that opinion on people, when really maybe God wants us to be a little bit more open about others' opinions and let God work in their heart. So I feel like to some extent, to mentor someone or to walk with someone in a season of life requires a certain level of discernment of saying, like, I'm not going to tell you what you should do, but I will point you in the right direction and I'll pray for you. I mean, like you say, like you wake up every morning and pray some people can think that that's just like not, like, doesn't do much, but it's actually probably the most important thing that you could do in leading anybody else's life. I mean, it doesn't matter who it is, but just being an example for the people that are around you and just catch just the drift of what your life and what you're about is, that that God would open their eyes to see God and not them, because it's so easy to lead people astray. So, I mean, like you said, it's so important just to pray and making sure that those words are not your words, but they're God's words, because we're going to be held accountable to all of our actions and our words and stuff. And I sure do not want to be the one that leads people down the wrong path. So I think, so important, the words.
And also,
prayers.
I think something to remember, if you think you have nothing to offer, like anybody can be a listener. And I think that sometimes that's all, younger people need, especially like maybe the age I'm in. They just need someone to talk to, and just someone who's going to sit and listen and like maybe allow them to just process themselves out loud, like what's going on. And, hopefully they can come to, maybe a conclusion on their own or discover something about themselves and about God. So that's one thing I'll say too, is like anybody can be a good listener.
Yeah.
So, and not be quick to
too.
just give advice. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, it's trusting God with our stories.
Absolutely.
And, and really trusting, I think, a couple podcasts ago, we, talked about the scripture in Romans 8, it says that he, that all things, that he uses it all. He uses it all. And sometimes, we have things in our life that, we would rather kind of like sweep under the rug, because maybe we made a mistake or something like that. And instead God wants to pull it out, because really if he's redeemed it, it's like a trophy in his hand, and he wants us to use it, because it may, like you said, it may help someone that, I did this, and, I recommend maybe you don't go down that, this is what happened to me. Or maybe it's, something that you can say, I understand, I've experienced that, and here's how God helped me in it, and I think that's, one of the things that can happen when you're working with someone and mentoring or just talking with them. It's amazing sometimes when you just have a conversation with someone and something sparks up and you're like, oh, now I know I'm talking to you. Now I know why, because there it is. I can share something that I know points you to God, because I ultimately know that's what you need, And, you were talking about the working with these, and talking with these young women. It's such a crucial time of life. When you think I think back on my college years, and I wish I had someone like you. I truly do. It would have probably prevented me from doing some really stupid things. Which I'm not going to talk about right now. But I mean, truly, it is such, that is so incredible. But,
Thank you.
And not maybe just even with that age group, but just, women in general, and discovering who God is, and discovering, who, what their purpose is. What kinds of things do you see as far as like, pressures, distractions, all those things that women face, that get in the way of discovering God and discovering what his purpose is in our life?
Yeah, I think for me, and I think I would say probably women in general, is trying to live up to other people's expectations, and not God's expectations. And I think that what we try to do, and I think social media has a lot to do with this. Not that it's like the devil. I like social media,
It's the
but
devil.
I think I think comparison. I think that we're constantly trying to figure out what the world wants of us, and just people's expectations, and not living up to God's expectations. I also think that women also struggle with not taking like a step into community, like finding a group of women, like we were talking about, so that way they can be their true, authentic selves. Because I think that a lot of times we, find friends and it's very like surface level, and can't really talk about the ugly and and all the things about God, but
Because there's lots of judgment too.
Yeah.
yes, and nobody wants to talk about all the stuff they're struggling with.
Yeah.
So I think that I would just encourage women to take a step out, send a text and say, hey, do you guys want to get breakfast? Because I think I did that. I think I was
you
the
are
person.
definitely the person that does that, because I'm not, and I'm so thankful that
okay.
I have a community. But I feel like you're the organizer. You're just like, breakfast people, let's go to breakfast, or like, let's do
Like,
this
what
or this.
time?
And like,
Yeah.
I'm probably not like that. But I think that when someone pulls me into, even if you're not the one that making the initiative, maybe you're the one that says yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like maybe you're the one that's reached out to.
Yeah.
And maybe it's outside of your comfort zone to go to breakfast and not know what to talk about, or I don't, I hardly
like
know
it's,
this person,
yeah,
but
it's
I'm taking
uncomfortable
a step
sometimes.
to try to find community. So yes, I'll go. Maybe that's your thing. So maybe it's
Yeah.
initiation.
Yeah, and even initiating like a mentor. Like if you really feel like that's something you need in your life, and you maybe have had your eye on a person, you're like, I really would like to get to know them more and would spend time with them. Like taking a step of intentionality and talking to, other women in your life, like that is going to make the biggest difference in discovering like who God is by their example, so that way you can discover, more about yourself and your purpose. So.
Yeah, I shared, I think it was on the X podcast, about when we came up with the word inspired, what I had like happened to be reading in 1 Thessalonians one day, and it was talking about Paul, this guy in the Bible that had experienced Jesus in a really real way. When he was actually just like walking on a road, he encountered Jesus, and it forever changed his life, because his life went from persecuting and killing Christians to actually becoming one, and becoming one of the most powerful vessels that God has used in human history to advance just his mission through Jesus. And so, but he actually had this time where he went around to a lot of churches, and one of these churches was in Thessalonica, and he comes and he visits there, and he kind of teaches them in the way of Jesus, and then he leaves, and then he writes letters. That's a lot of what the New Testament is a lot of letters from different people encouraging or calling out the church or the city or whatever. So he writes this letter to the Thessalonians, and he says, what I hear about you guys is really amazing, because we came to you and you imitated us. I mean, you didn't know who Jesus was, but we told you about him, and we told you what he's done. And from that point, you became imitators of me and of the Lord and of the people that came with me. And now that I'm away, you have no idea the stories that I'm hearing coming out of this city, because you chose to be imitators and you chose to live by example. You might have not even known what you were doing at the time, but you were imitating what we were doing in our relationship with Jesus. And now you're influencing and you're inspiring those not only in your city, but the one that's that's even to the next city over, and then the next region over. And that's what it's all about, is like becoming, like allowing someone's story, like you said, like, if you have your eye on a person that's just kind of like, you intrigue me. And, the things that you do and the way you live your life, I want to know more about that. Then, don't be hesitant to say, I would like to learn. Because I think because we live in the world we live in, we think we know everything, and we have access to innumerable amounts of knowledge. At our fingertips with the internet and our phones and smart devices and all this. And I think that it's almost put us in a position where we're afraid to be needy to learn, and where we are open to a place where like, I don't know this, and I don't have this part of my life all together, and I would actually like to learn. And so I think it's countercultural for us to kind of do that, to say, hey, whatever you're doing looks amazing. I need help. Can you help guide me? And it doesn't maybe even have to be like this season long endeavor, but it can be like, hey, I would love to grab coffee. I'd love to pick your brain in a few things and ask you a few questions. Like, the way you live your life inspires me. I just kind of want to know about you. I think that even just something as small as that can really be the key that opens up a lot of, things inside. And I know for me, I'm an external processor. And so it helps me to get into the presence of a friend that knows my true self and that I have equity with, and that I've had time developing this relationship with, just to say, like, even if it's just like, right now I'm dealing with this, blah, 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 and then by the end I come on the other side and I'm like, I didn't really need you to answer any questions. I just needed to listen to myself talk, So I think even those instances are just really help with self-discovery. And it's not only discovering myself, but it's discovering God in the process.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
I just think, I have loved your story and the parts and the areas. You wear so many hats. Like when Janice was named teacher, servant, like you help do servant leader, onboarding for servant leaders that want to serve. And just having a baby and being a mom of 3 and being a pastor's wife. And like, I think that's really cool. And you wear so many hats and you do it really well. And it's always so encouraging the way that you live your life and the way that you've chosen to live your life, and to be open, and you're so friendly and inviting. And
thank you.
Yeah, I've loved having you on here. So thanks for clearing time in your busy schedule.
It was great though. It was, like I said, great to be with humans, adults. I guess I'm with humans every day, but adults.
People that can have conversations.
Take a break to not change a diaper. It was really nice. So thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And you are going to want to come back next week. We actually have another guest, and I'm really excited to announce that we're actually going to have Pastor Tim's wife, Laura Lee Moore, and she's going to come on, and you're in for a treat. She's going to talk about dwelling with God. I think so many of us have the question, what does it even mean to dwell with God? And so she's going to speak into that, and so you're going to want to come back next week.
Thanks so much for listening. Our hope is that everyone who hears these episodes, near or far, would know that the invitation at our table is always open. You might not be sitting at this table, but our desire is that you would join in on these conversations. So if you were inspired by today's talks, send us an email at inspired@thex.church. We'd love to hear your thoughts, stories, and questions. And as always, don't forget to rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts.